Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. Got my buddy Austin Taylor back in the building. Austin, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Hanging in there, man. Just day at a time. Excited to break down this Big 12 championship. I'm excited. Great week of the year.
I know, man. It seems like the week now is starting to drag out a little bit because it's as we record, it's only Tuesday, so just waiting on this with a lot of anticipation. For those of you who have not seen Austin on the channel before, he's been on here several times. Normally helps me with Texas basketball content along with Colin and Ryan. And Austin normally comes on probably, I would say, once a season to help me with Big 12 type stuff, football wise, on a broader perspective. But Austin's here today because, you went to school at Oklahoma State, you worked at Oklahoma State, have some good relationships there. You also worked at Texas, and you're Texas fan, and but you support the Oklahoma State University. So I couldn't think of a better person to really talk about this game, break things down, educate myself as well as our viewers on what this Oklahoma State Cowboys team brings to the table, considering we did not play Oklahoma State this year. And, it's a very different looking team from the one that we've been accustomed to seeing the last few years under Mike Gundy. So that's why Austin's here, and I'm going to get to Austin in a second. I also want to give a quick thank you to our sponsor, Last Stand Hats. Shout out to laststandhats.com/fanatic. If you missed the Black Friday sale or the Cyber Monday sale, don't you worry. Hit up laststandhats.com/fanatic. Get your promo code 10% off at checkout, so we get you some savings there, get you some gear, hit that, advanced shipping or whatever. If you're trying to have some merch by Saturday, looking fresh at the watch party, or if you're going to be in Arlington at the game, hit up laststandhats.com/fanatic. It was great to see my buddy Mike out there at the tailgate on Friday night representing Last Stand Hats. Austin, I'm going to start here, man, because I'm on a big picture scale. You and I, we talk multiple times a day and via text and stuff. And beginning of the season, I was like, with the Gundy stuff, A, out of sight, out of mind because he wasn't on the schedule. But B, just seeing the flux of the roster and the amount of guys. I mean, you look at a guy, he had a quarterback there for several years, and Spencer Sanders, and all the talent that seemingly was walking out of the program. The expectations seem to be low. They get off to a relatively slow start in the season, and I felt like a lot of people dismissed Oklahoma State in general.
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% right there. I mean, just a program that was absolutely decimated by the portal. I think they had 18 guys that I guess actually lettered. I think 12 total starters on both sides of the ball. I mean, you look at the likes of Spencer Sanders, a guy that honestly Oklahoma State fans really were, they wanted to build a statue of that guy, with all the critical wins that he's had over the years, leading the team 2 years ago to inches away from a Big 12 championship and a Fiesta Bowl victory over Notre Dame. This team is obviously, it's got some of those pieces that were still on that team, but for the most part, this is a brand new squad. I mean, you lose guys like JP Richardson, who's having success at TCU, Spencer, obviously, on to Ole Miss. Jarek Bernard Converse up at Washington is their cornerback number one. So, I mean, multiple guys, Jaden Jernigan at Missouri playing some significant snaps at defensive end for Eli's staff up there. But, man, just a roster of guys that 2 years ago were good enough to compete. And then, going into this year, I think expectations were not that high in Stillwater. I know for me personally, I was like, man, if they could get 7-8 wins, that'd be awesome. And then I think I remember texting 2 or 3 weeks into the season, I was like, if this team wins a bowl game or gets to a bowl game, that is a huge success. So a ton of turnover. Coaching staff remain the same, but I mean, this is just a roster that got poached by the big fish, to be honest with you. But really remarkable job by Gundy so far to just completely turn this thing around and look in the mirror and say, hey, we got to fix it, or we can sit here and just continue to get beat, quite frankly. But a ton of resiliency from this team, and obviously it's going to be a big part in what happens on Saturday.
The Cowboys were picked to finish 7th in the Big 12 preseason poll. I mean, let's be realistic here, right? I mean, people, and it's not from an arrogant place as Texas fans, it's the reality of preseason because we know we've struggled with preseason polls before. Texas was expected to be in this game on Saturday. Texas was expected to win the conference. They were expected to finish number one, and so far they have lived up to said preseason expectations. The Oklahoma State Cowboys, on the other hand, with the attrition to the portal and just some of the crazy things that were going on behind the scenes, them being picked to finish seventh, it's like middle of the pack, competing for a bowl, blah, blah, blah. Let me ask you, so two things. A, for me, outside looking in, I'm thoroughly impressed with what Gundy's done this year. You cannot, at this point, whether you like him or love him or hate him, he's a damn good football coach. And it's the proof is in the pudding with what he's produced. And I think he's sitting in a very dangerous spot if I'm a Texas fan, which I am. But for those of us looking out here at this, where he can, there's what pressure is there on Mike Gundy on Saturday? What pressure is there on Oklahoma State? Texas over here trying to beef up their resume for the playoffs and 12.5-point favorites and all these things. And so I feel like Gundy he's thrived. That's why he's in the game, right? He's thrived from behind the scenes and coming up. He's thrived when faced with having that opportunity to beat OU in the last time they got together, at least for the time being. So with Gundy, to me, is it far-fetched to say this is the most impressive job he's done, or is that too much to
No.
say with how long he's been at Oklahoma State?
Yeah, not to cut you off. I think emphatically yes, this is the best coaching job that he's done. Obviously, you fast forward 10 plus years ago, he had a team that was depending on who you are, think that's a Mister made field goal up in Ames, Iowa, away from competing in a national championship. However, you had Justin Blackman and Brandon Whedon and highly touted guys walking through those doors, and quite
First
frankly,
round NFL draft picks. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And no disrespect to this current roster or even the roster that, played in this game 2 years ago. You just don't see the NFL talent on it. And I'm not saying these guys aren't good. Obviously, you know what you have in Ollie Gordon. We'll get to the personnel stuff later. But in terms of just where you were at, I mean, this team lost by 25 plus points to South Alabama less than 2 months ago, right? End of September. And I think you're at one point, you're 3-2. You got to win over, some non-conference. You go to Arizona State and beat them, and everybody's like, okay, here's what Oklahoma State is, and then you play a South Alabama, and really, I watched every snap of that game just get drubbed. And to look up where they're at now from this point, and Mike he's said this multiple times in his press conferences. He got his staff and his team together somewhere around the end of September and said, right after their first Big 12 game, and just said, we have a choice to make. We can either sulk and we can let this thing get really ugly. I think as you saw, maybe a team down in Waco kind of let happen, or you can let this go the other way and say, hey, let's try to fight out of it and let's see what happens. And I think they did that. It started with, knocking off Kansas State. Everybody was kind of like, okay, that's a good win. You go knock off Kansas. Okay, that's a really good win, right? And they just kept rolling. And then we've talked about it. It's like they either blow out a team or get blown out. I remember you guys texting me. They're down 45-3 in the pouring rain at UCF, and I'm like, man, I got no answers. I don't know. So just
You did,
I mean, total Jekyll and Hyde team, and I think that's a little bit of the uneasiness that I've seen some realistic Texas fans, like yourself and others have told me. This is not. I mean, I'm seeing crazy score predictions, and we'll get into that, but they are in this championship game for a reason, right? It is not like a Michigan Iowa scenario where you can look at two bodies of work and say, okay, there's no way that this works out. And I'm not going to give a prediction here, obviously, right now at this point in time, but no, they're in this game for a reason.
Michigan and Iowa too. And that's one of my things with the Big Ten is the divisions and the way that their games are scheduled. Iowa did not play Michigan or Ohio State in the regular season. They played Penn State, who they were blown out, I think shut out and blown out at Penn State. That was like their big game, whether I don't know how they name their East or West or whatever they call themselves. But when they played that other side of the Big Ten, they played Penn State and some other teams. They didn't. And, when you're battling against the Illinois of the world and the Wisconsins and folks like that, that's a little different. We we didn't cross paths with Oklahoma State. Then Oklahoma State did seem to play more of the G5 incomers. I mean, they played BYU, they played Houston, they played UCF.
All four of
Um,
them. They played all
so
four of them.
yeah, and Cincinnati. Excuse me.
Yep.
They play. Yeah, so they actually got to play all four of the newcomers. So it's a little different there, but you still played you still played a West Virginia. They still played some of the. I look at one thing I have a question about because you mentioned the meeting, the kind of come to Jesus meeting the staff had. Was that during the bye week? Because which I believe would have been September 30th, because they played back-to-back weeks where they lost to South Alabama, and then they lost I think that was the 16th. The 23rd, they lost to Iowa State, which was their Big 12 opener, and then the bye, and then boom, the win streak happens. What in your mind? I mean, I know what you talked about in terms of the coaches and them getting on the same page. What happened on the field? Where did you see a change on the field? Because you talked about seeing all these snaps against South Alabama in the Iowa State game, and then when they played the Kansas schools, what was what clicked, or what was the difference that you saw happening on the field?
Yeah, specifically one play sticks out of my mind of the South Alabama game, and then we'll carry on to Iowa State and K-State. But Jaden Bray had a wide open slant over the middle. I think it was first and goal on the 10. Not an easy spot to score in the lower red, but right in his hands, and he dropped it. And I think 2 plays later, South Alabama gets a turnover and goes and scores. And I think Mike alluded to in his press conference that his team was so young that they could not bottle that bad moment up, put it beside them, and say, hey,
Next
it
play.
happened. Yeah, next play, right? And they just let it spiral out of control. And as you've seen in college football, I can do that. And then the next week, Iowa State, they lose 34-27. They were in the game and made a couple turnovers. Alan Bowman, I think, threw a couple that game late in the game where you just can't have it. Then there was the bye week. Then there was the come to Jesus. Then they go beat a really talented Kansas State team 29-21 and really just were on top of everything the entire game. They took care of the ball. That was Ollie Gordon's, hey, you're running back one game, if you will. I don't know why it took that long. I don't know why it took that long to solidify Alan Bowman as QB1. We had a little triceratops of quarterbacks going on with Gunnar Gundy and Garrett Rangel, but it was almost like the preseason is over. This is where we come together. But man, the Kansas State game, just throw on the tape. Watch that game and the South Alabama game. I don't know. I'm not on the sidelines, but it really did look like 2 brand new units on both sides of the ball. So obviously, whatever they did, whatever accountability they needed to hold with each other, it's worked out for them. So
Reason, and I'm glad you said that, because some of my OU friends went before they played. They're like, I mean, we're not going to lose to somebody that lost to South Alabama, and I said, these traps that you guys set for yourselves. I understand that the fans aren't in the room prepping and we don't play on the field, but it's a mentality that sometimes can come across of not setting yourself for the proper expectations of what the team is about to face. And so it's like, hey, y'all aren't playing that version of Oklahoma State. You're playing the very motivated, fired up version, very similar to what Texas we had to deal with OU in the Cotton Bowl. Same thing, right? So when you're playing these versions of teams, especially in college, with the emotion and all that's going on and what's at stake, that's where there's a big difference with like the NFL level and maybe a little bit more predictability in those spots. But I just think that Oklahoma State overall, we would be doing ourselves as Texas fans a big disservice of even bringing that up at this point. Yeah, you may watch the tape to see some things that previous teams exploited and what they had success with, but these are clearly, it's a clearly different football team. Like you said, Ollie Gordon coming on. I don't know what took so long. One of the best running backs in the country. Have they announced the Doak stuff yet? The semifinalists yet?
he is a finalist or a semifinalist, whatever it is. I
Or
saw them
whatever it
tweet it
is.
out
Yeah.
earlier today. Yep.
Finalist. I'm sorry, finalist. Yeah. He's been terrific. Now we just came off of seeing Taj Brooks last week with Tech, who was he's a one-man band as well. And I think Pro Football Focus has him. It's one of the leading tackle breakers. But Ollie's a little different type of runner and presents some unique challenges. I know Texas is elite stop in the run. I know this is where people are gonna, write in, hey, we only allow 2.9 yards per carry. Hey, we're top 10 in all the run defense metrics. Thank you, T Sweat and friends. However, when you're playing a 1,500-yard runner, but you also are playing against a team where Alan Bowman, 3 of the last 4 games, has thrown the ball over 40 times. Talk to me about that offense and just the dynamic there between Ollie but also Alan Bowman still putting the ball in the air a bunch of times.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it starts with the offensive line. And I think an important stat, it's not even a stat, it's just a fact that Texas fans need to know. There is not a starter on the Oklahoma State offensive line who is younger than 23 years old. Between Dalton Cooper, Jason Brooks, Joe Mikulski, Preston Wilson, and Jake Springfield, 4 of the 5 are redshirt seniors. So they're very old and very experienced. 3 of the 5 played against Baylor in that 2021 Big 12 championship. So they're a typical zone blocking scheme that really run from the inside out. Obviously, Ollie is the heavy hitter. He's the bell cow, between him and Jaden Nixon, who is really more of your change up back, a little bit faster, smaller in the backfield. And then you look at Alan Bowman. I mean, if you look at his track record, it's a bunch of slants, it's a bunch of stops, it's a bunch of just safe throws. And yet he still has more.
You talked about the offensive line. Nobody's younger than 23, you said? 20.
Yep.
How old is Alan Bowman? He got to be 40.
Man, I mean, Texas fans know he was the horns down with 50 seconds left against Texas Tech back in the day. But
with Sam Ellinger out there.
Exactly. That's the trigger man. He's got more miles than an 18-wheeler down I-35. But anyway,
he's so old that he knows like all of Michigan signals too, and like now they got McNamara out here giving. Did you see that too? McNamara is now helping with signals for Iowa because he said he knows them.
Yeah, it's we won't get into that. I've already shared with you my thoughts on that. Obviously, off camera.
All these Michigan guys are out here talking about it, though. It's not just them, but I'm just saying, like, he's so old in the sense of like that's how much college football he's been around.
Real quick, they asked him the other day. They were like, "Is Ollie Gordon the best running back you've played with?" And he's like, "Well, I played with Blake Corum. I played with Sharadrick Thompson down in Lubbock. I played with Taj Brooks. I played with, all these guys." And I'm like, he listed 6 or 7 guys that I'm just like, man, it makes me feel old. However, he did say Ollie was far and away the best back he's ever played with, which I think is a testament to how talented that young man is. I know in the press conference yesterday, they asked Ollie, did Texas offer you? And he said, yeah, 12 hours before signing day. So I know that he feels some type of way about Texas in the back of his mind. And it wasn't just Texas. A&M was late to the party. LSU was late to the party. Everybody was, obviously. But if you
dumb because I'm sorry, I hate to go back in time, but I'm going to do it. When he was at Trinity Euless, you talk about one man band.
Yep.
It was him and the Samoan brothers over there just mauling away like crazy at Trinity Euless. They had a little playoff run before they ran into some really top tier teams, but Ollie Gordon was getting busy on a weekly basis in Dallas-Fort Worth on a weekly basis. Yep. And so the offer situation always, it was confusing and perplexing for me because this is a guy that he would go for like 38 carries, 40-something carries, 6,
and he would throw touchdowns. He would throw it too. They line him up anywhere: kick return, punt return, wildcat quarterback. I mean, he was Savion Red before Savion Red. But anyway, yeah, real quick, just finishing up about Bowman. A lot of stick routes, a lot of stop routes, really safe throws. And yet what's funny is he has more interceptions than he does touchdowns. He has 10 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, which means he will, fumble the ball. He'll throw it away. He had a nasty, nasty pick 6 early against BYU last week. That was just bad. And, he said there was miscommunication there, but it's happened multiple times. But as far as the offensive line goes, it's going to be really interesting because this is an offensive line that's not going to hold. It's not going to beat themselves. It's not going to be fooled really by Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy if they do any stunts or twists. Now, they might get sheer outmanned, just talent for talent, but they're not going to be fooled with anything Texas tries up front, in my opinion. I think they're too old, too veteran. And Coach Dickey up there does a really good job with those guys. Now, man for man, it's not close. I think if you ask Oklahoma State, if you ask their coaching staff, hey, is there anybody that you would have on our, you know what I'm talking about? If you ask Texas, hey, is there anybody over there that you would want for us? I don't think you're going to get a lot of numbers. I think talent, man for man, Texas is by far and away the more talented team. However, we see this almost every year in college football. You wonder why K-State's been so good. They're old. And I think seniority matters. And I think, you play against these guys, and I understand T Sweat and Murph and those guys are older. But when you match up a 23-year-old with a 19-year-old, most of the time, I don't even have to finish that sentence, right? You know what you're getting. So anyway, I don't think it'll be the most dynamic offense Texas has seen all year. I think they've faced some other ones like it. This is how I put it. They really operate like Texas Tech. And I know if you're a Longhorn fan, you're probably like, oh, thank God, right? However, I think they're way better than Texas Tech. I think they execute at a higher level. I think they have more talent on the outside with Leon Johnson and Brennan Presley. That's another guy that's been in college for 50 years, it seems like.
Yeah, Presley's been in college forever.
But they know what they're doing. They know their culture. Coach Dunn, Casey Dunn, the offensive coordinator, has been running Gundy's offense for a long time since I was in school. So they fully trust each other and they fully feel confident in their game plan. So we'll see. But that's an interesting personnel little question on the offense there.
Well, as we finish up the offensive matchups, I do think from a Texas standpoint, I still feel I'm always going to feel as good as I possibly can with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. They are older guys as well. They've played a crap ton of football, and they've played the best football in the country at their positions. So they're not just older guys, but they're actually the best in the business at what they do.
Yep.
And Mike Gundy made the comment today about, or not today, but this week about, we're going to block them the same way we've blocked them for the last 15 years and, things of that sort. That is what it is. These guys have responded recently when they felt like they've been slighted. And I know Byron Murphy tweeted, 11 a.m. and some of the things like that. But that's I love the way my guys have performed up front, especially the rotation that we have. So I think that's going to be a great matchup to watch, a veteran offensive line that has good communication and moves well together, obviously, with the success we've seen from Ollie Gordon, and having to protect the Alan Bowman, who's not mobile. So they got to protect him, right, in order to get the ball off that much. So I have to give credit to the offensive line. But if I'm betting on any group to give them hell and give them issues, I feel really great about the guys we have on our end. Any other tidbits you want to throw out offensively before we go to the other side of the ball of Oklahoma State defense versus the offense?
Just real quick, with how many stick routes and slants and just kind of not even catching the ball on the move that Oklahoma State likes to do. They'll do an end around and a jet sweep every now and then, but it really all depends. And this is really a perfect segue into the Texas defense. If Texas corners can play that press man like we saw a majority of the Texas Tech game, I think it's going to be a long night personally for Oklahoma State, just because I don't think the trio of kind of three-headed monster receivers, Leon Johnson, Rashad Owens, who's another redshirt junior, been there forever, and Brennan Presley, I just don't think they can consistently get open unless we see from Texas what we saw early in the year, 9 yards off on a 3rd and 2. Then yes, they're going to pick that apart all day long. They're going to run to set up the pass. But like you said, Texas pressures the quarterback. Mr. Bowman does not like taking sacks, and he will throw that thing away. So it starts up front, obviously, but this is a game to look for Jahdae Barron, look for Malik Muhammad, look for Terrence Brooks, who's been really good hands lately. Obviously, had a great pick in the Tech game, really heady. Like you said in your previous videos, those guys were recruited to Texas playing press man, playing physical, using their hands, using good technique. Like you said, it doesn't matter if I'm running at a corner full speed. If I have 12 yards, I'm going to get my route off, right? So anyway, that'll just be interesting to see what Texas comes out in. I don't know the health of Ryan Watts. I think he's questionable. I would lean to doubtful, to be honest with you, just based on what I've heard. But we're not going to speculate that. I just think one little tidbit is this is really going to depend on how Texas secondary comes out to stop Oklahoma State offensively.
I think it's going to be a fun matchup. Now, Texas offense, against this 3-3-5
3-3, yeah, Joker.
Right. So I think this is going to be kind of fun to honestly look at and break down because, Oklahoma State, there's been some metrics talking about, teams of destiny and luck and blah, 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 all type of stuff. But they've been able to generate some turnovers. They've been able to generate some havoc. They've given up a lot of points and had some really fun games. But within those games, in order to secure victory, you have to have those key stops, those moments. And one thing is that I've noticed with Oklahoma State, they are able to get pressure, and they are able to somehow get those turnovers. I mean, BYU put it on the carpet a few times last week to their demise. And then, short yardage, sometimes they're able to make some things happen. Talk to me about that matchup there versus this Texas offense led by Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, I think this is a tricky defense, and obviously Haycock at Iowa State's kind of the godfather of it, if you will, in the Big 12. I know they don't like to call it a 3-3-5. Their preference is the 3-3 joker, and it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
funny. Texas has Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. Those are the two 1 and 3 techs essentially. Those are their two guys, really good up front. Oklahoma State has these East Texas boys from Pleasant Grove High School in Texarkana and Nick Martin and Xavier Benson. And these two are really probably, in my opinion, the best two linebacking duo, tandem, if you will. These two are just tackle machines. I think Nick Martin has like 120 tackles. And it's really interesting. They'll line up in 3 down. They will line up in 4 down. I think an interesting thing to see is they really, between Benson, Martin, and Daniels, it's really whoever has the strength to their side. And they essentially tell them, hey, go make a play on the football. And that's why I think those guys just rack up so many tackles. Daniels usually takes care of it in the back end. Benson and Martin are the ones to clean up front of the front four, and Walter Scheid, Colin Clay, Anthony Goodlow has been a really good defensive end off the edge. I mean, Quinn said it in his media availability, and in most of these, I'm just like, okay, coach speak, player speak, whatever. But he said they're really good at what they're really good at, and I was like, that might be philosophical, Mr. Ewers, out of you. I love it out of you, but anyway, they are. They're really good at what they're really good at. They don't like you to get in a rhythm. You would think that you can run all day on a 3-3-5 or a 3-3 joker, but those two guys are just so quick off the edges that they really plug up and cover up guys, as Mike likes to say. They don't block guys, they cover up guys. But they're really gap sound, and Texas is going to have to block it really well. We're going to have to see guys like DJ Campbell and Hayden Connor and those guys really pull well, really move guys. If not, it's going to be a struggle for anybody to move the ball, whether it's C4 or Jaden Blue or any of the bevy of running backs that they have. But Quinn's going to have to be good as well. Cam Smith at a Little Elm is really good. Dylan Smith, his little brother at a Little Elm, is really good. Those are two safeties that Oklahoma State really plays a significant amount. I don't know what's in the water at Little Elm, but if you're a DB and you've came out of there, I feel like you've ended up somewhere, P5. Ryan Watts, Terrence Brooks, the Smith brothers, I mean, they're cranking them out. So shout out Little Elm. But again, we've seen Quinn do really well and Sark do really well against the 3-3-5. We've also seen him absolutely struggle against it. I mean, that was Sark's kryptonite coming into the year, right? So it'll be interesting. But personnel-wise, they definitely have the dudes. Nicholas Martin's a redshirt sophomore. Benson's a redshirt senior. A lot of the guys are older as well. Don't forget about Colin Oliver off the edge. He's been a problem for a couple years. So again, Corey Black is kind of the anchor corner. So guys that I'm saying the names of, if you're like, oh, that guy's still there, he is, right? They're all still there. They're an older veteran group, and if anybody wasn't decimated by the portal, it was this side of the ball on defense.
I do like the fact that veteran aspect, the communication that's there. And I think that's why you guys were able to hold, or Oklahoma State was able to hold the season together, and having that accountability, because how else would that, you can't do that with young guys when you get off to that type of start. Right. And so that veteran leadership being there is key. What encourages me with Texas is a couple things. We have played some older teams this year so far. So we had to play two older teams with a backup quarterback and navigate through that, where we had our highs and our lows. And we've seen a lot of the, I understand 3-3 joker and some of the things that you guys that Oklahoma State will manipulate there. But I think what's noteworthy here is at least Sark and them have seen this so much. So many people have run variations of it, or even Houston, a team like Houston stalling it at the last minute just for Texas. I think now it's become something that, we can use to our advantage, especially in the passing game. Last year, this was Fright Night for Quinn Ewers in Stillwater, where he has the infamous, 49 attempt game, and we won't talk about how many of those he completed.
No.
But that's not how Sark wants to play football, right? Sark I think he's been as balanced as play callers you've seen, of one of the better play callers, and he stuck to that, even with Malik Murphy in there, with Quinn back there, with Jonathan Brooks being out, and now with Cedric Baxter and Jaden Blue being in there. He has stuck to the consistency on both ends. He's stuck to his screen stuff. He's stuck to his short game. So those things encourage me there. I think the key is something you highlighted earlier: the growth of DJ Campbell and those guys on the offensive line to go out and get theirs. I've liked the way our offensive line has played the last 2 weeks against Iowa State and Texas Tech. I think they've answered the call when Jonathan Brooks went down, and they seemingly, to me, taken their game to a next level. I also think they realize Quinn Ewers ain't 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a protection standpoint and staying on time, we really have to be on our stuff there. To me, that's the matchup for Texas. If Texas is going to cover, I should say, then I think the offensive line had a really, really nice day.
Sure.
Because as good as those tackling machines are, they're only effective if they're defeating blocks and if they're spooking guys. If DJ Campbell's coming to pull, that's the whole thing. Like, he's coming to pull, but your guy's at a distance, and now he can work around him, right, and get that tackle for loss, and put us in negative play position. So I think, Austin, that's the key for me in terms of this matchup when looking at the two teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a thing Mike Gundy spoke about in his press conference, just, giving accolades to Texas. He was like, man, they're good, they're talented, they have guys every year. This is a team that averages 35 a game. And then he said this, and they don't go fast. They'd be averaging 60 if they went fast, which is crazy to think about, right? That if he sees it and we see it and we're like, man, that is true. Like, if they really ramp the tempo up like we've seen Oklahoma do, right? I know nobody watching this is going to be like, oh, don't remind me, but it's true. I mean, those guys are 65 plus points 4 or 5 times this year, it seems like. And it's just all gas, no brakes. That's the real definition of it. But I feel like Sark just wants, with this group, just be in control, right? And I think that is something that would wear Oklahoma State down as this game goes. And you kind of see that a little bit. I know they've came from behind a couple games, but against Kansas State, that was really it. They shut down the Kansas State running game. They forced Will Howard to make deep throws, which is not his bag at all. And they just stayed in the game. They did the same thing with Kansas, right? They wanted to force Jason Bean out of the pocket, right? So I know they're going to try to do that with Quinn, but it's going to come down to the offensive line. If they can cover up guys and give Quinn time to fully let things develop, I really think it's going to be difficult for Texas not to win. And again, like you said, to cover, they're going to be able to do that. But again, these are college kids, and this is a big-time championship game, and both teams want it really bad, and both programs really need it bad. I mean, for Oklahoma State to, stay in the Big 12 and fend off the I don't want to say they're not a rival, but the school leaving for the SEC and say, hey, we're Big 12 champs, that would feel awesome for them. And then, as we know, Texas fans want nothing more than to stick it to Brett Yormark and walk out of Jerry World with a ring on their finger. So it's very intriguing, man. We'll see.
It's interesting from that note, and I think that's a great place to kind of transition to. They are, I said earlier, I don't think there's pressure per se on Oklahoma State directly. Let me clarify this, because that's a good point. Maybe not on Oklahoma State, because to me, they've overperformed.
Mm-hmm.
But they are carrying the weight of the conference. It's not Texas versus OU, where it's two teams that are both leaving. It's Texas versus it would mean something. They're carrying. I mean, I've seen Texas Tech sites. I've seen West Virginia sites. Like, we didn't play West Virginia this year. Like, all these different Twitter accounts where they're like, please do it, Gundy, please come through one time. Like, it seems like they've combined all their collective energy I wouldn't be surprised if some coaches made some phone calls to Mike to help out with tips here or there of hey, this is why, and then on Texas's side, it's trying to vanquish everybody on the hateful eight list,
Yep.
which
Yeah.
they weren't on the original list because we didn't play them, and now they are, and now it's like, damn, we literally could leave the conference having defeated every single one of those teams leaving on our way out, which is remarkable to think about, considering where Texas was as a program a year ago, 2 years ago, and now where Texas is today. So I think we'll feel a lot of that in the stadium, quite frankly,
Yeah.
Saturday morning.
And here's another thing. I'm just trying to think. I'm sure there is. I'm trying to pull it up real quick. I'm trying to think of the guys that are on the current Texas roster that have lost that have beaten Oklahoma State. I know Sark's never beaten Mike Gundy. I know Quinn's never beaten Oklahoma State. I mean, maybe I'm trying to think. I'll pull it up real quick. I mean, I
It
know
would have to be people that were on the 2020
2020.
the Joseph Osai sack game in overtime.
Right.
That was the last
Yeah,
time.
I remember. Jake Smith was on that Texas team too to date us a little bit. So, yeah, it's been a minute, which is crazy because I was at that game in Stillwater last year, and Texas is up at the half and they're cruising, and Xavier Worthy with the perfect, whatever Sark special that was just awesome. And I'm seeing Oklahoma State fans about to pack it up, and I'm like, I don't know. If you've watched the game of Boone Pickens, it's not over till it's over. But yeah, this is interesting. I mean, I think Sark is really. I know he's hadn't beaten everybody, but this is a coach. I guarantee you, he's like, I don't want to leave this thing without beating him. Obviously, Gundy's been doing it a long time, and he's really good and really respected by a lot of people. But the underlying tones of this game are really interesting.
Yeah, I think from a coaching standpoint, Gundy has to outcoach Texas significantly to try to win this game. If you're Sark, you leave it in the hands of your players. Don't get in your own way. Don't get goofy, and stay on time. I think in a neutral site atmosphere in Arlington, we should be okay. I mean, it's different when you're on the road in Stillwater and there's the wind and all these things, like you
Paddle
said, weird
people.
things happening at T-Boone, but you are playing in a comfortable. A lot of our players have played multiple games at AT&T Stadium on both sides, so there should be a natural sense of comfort. Texas decided to wear the icy whites for this game, which they've had some success with this year, obviously against Bama, so they feel good there. And you know what? I'm all for it. I love the Stormtrooper whites when they come out in those. The only other thing I wanted to say before we signed off here was, special teams. That's been a big thing for Texas the last couple weeks, where we've really helped create some distance against our opponent. Any notes from Oklahoma State special teams wise? Or I
Yeah.
think Sark said today Xavier Worthy is one of the best punt returners, if not the best, the leading punt returner now in the
Yep.
country, which shocked me. I hadn't even thought about it.
Yep.
But been impressed with Texas special teams, obviously coming off of last week's performance.
Yeah, Gundy said in his press conference, he said they're like plus 300 yards in punt return, which is a stat that he's never seen before. And I think as a Texas fan, we're like, man, it's really been that good. And it's like, yeah, it really has. I mean, if you watch Xavier Worthy, I mean, just that extra 30-yard return, Texas starts their drives at midfield. It seemed like we were on, the side of the field about to score against Texas Tech probably 80% of the game. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, good point. The
So,
field position was wild, and
yeah.
they were having punting challenges too, but the field position was crazy in that game.
Right. But I will say Oklahoma State, Todd Bradford up there, the recruiting guy that really gets all the specialists there. He's been there forever from the Quinn Sharp, Dan Bailey days, and Matt Amendola, who's on the Houston Texans now. I mean, they've cranked out punters and kickers, just as good as Texas has, honestly. They got a really good one in Alex Hale. Him and Bert Auburn, if there's a prop bet on over field goals to be made, hammer it because those guys are nails. They really are. Alex Hale was really good. Obviously, I know he had one blocked last week, but that wasn't on him against BYU. If he would have made it, the game would have been over way sooner than Oklahoma State fans wanted it to be, or way quicker, I mean. But anyway, Yeah, I mean, they're really good in kick coverage as well. Parker Robertson is another guy that's really talented. I actually went to school with his older brother. He's number 39, and he's the gunner down there, and he does a really good job of just sewing up guys. And they're going to be very technical, and they're going to be very sound, just like Jeff Banks in Texas is. It'll be very interesting to see who wins, because I know in these championship games, there's always one, right? There's always a punt return or a muff or a kick return touchdown, right? It's inevitable that it's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see which side it happens to. But again, this is a game where, if Sark becomes aggressive, and this is kind of my last fleeting point. We've seen it a couple times. I was going to really ask you, if Sark is in that territory where it's 4th and 6, and he wants to puff his chest out a little bit and say, I trust my guys, let's get this thing. And then you don't, and Oklahoma State just makes a field goal and makes a field goal and makes a field goal, because that is one stark difference between Sark and Gundy. Gundy's going to take his points almost 100% of the time. 4th and 1, I mean, it was the 33-yard line, 4th and 1, and Gundy goes and kicks the field goal. You're right. And it's like Sark is going for that 100 out of 100 times, right? But two totally different coaching styles. We've seen Texas go for it on 4th and short, not get it, and let teams hang around. We saw it in TCU. We saw it in Kansas State. We saw it in other games, right? So that'll be very interesting too. And I think Sark's done a better job of trusting Bert Auburn. What's he made? 16 in a row, 17 in a row? You can correct me if I'm wrong. But the trust is there now. So that'll be another kind of interesting wrinkle. When you get in those 4th and shorts, 3rd and shorts, do you see Sark, do you see Gundy kind of go out of their comfort zone a little bit and either take the points or go for it? That'll just be a focal point to watch this Saturday.
I think if you're an Oklahoma State fan watching this video right now, if since Austin's been very transparent on the good, bad, and ugly from their end, that's you're leading me right there, right? So short yardage and really red zone execution for this Texas offense is the concern. That's how teams have been able to come back. That's how they have not been able to put teams away from before. Now, last week, again, we got off and popping in so many different ways. We got a pick six. We got a kick return for a touchdown. But we were kicking field goals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to your point, Austin, yes, we were taking – there's certain opportunities where it's like, all right, man, take the points. Let's do the math. Let's go up 17 versus trying to go for it and only staying up 14 and only, let's go from 2 scores to 3 scores or 3 scores to 4 scores. Totally get all that. However, with Sark, I think the last 2 weeks, he has managed the game better as a head coach, to your point, and understood game flow and feel. I think you feel that out. I talk about this. I haven't said this in a while, but, kind of my coaching index of you're either coaching scared, conservative, aggressive, or reckless. And, sometimes he teeters, from one spectrum to the other.
Very, very much so. And that's kind of another thing too, is those field goals, you make 3 of them, that's more than you can get on one trip with a touchdown and a 2, right? And we see it, if Texas doesn't get a 4th and 1, I think you see some, I guess, a reaction from some fans, and it's like, oh man, we didn't get it. But I'm like, man, that's a turnover. It's what's it called when you don't convert a 4th down? A turnover on downs, right? That's a turnover. So those add up, right? And you look back at the final box score, and it's not going to show up. It'll show up in the intricate one where it's like turnover on downs. But, dude, you have 4 or 5 turnover on downs. You might as well have thrown 6 picks in that same spot, right? It's still the same result. The other team still gets the ball. The other team gets to steal a possession from you. And that's how I see, a way less talented team, to be quite honest with everybody here in Oklahoma State. That is the way that they stay in this game, is stealing possessions from a Texas team that either gets greedy or just flat out doesn't execute.
We will see. Austin, can't wait to watch this game, like we said, on Saturday. And I just wanted to, like I said, have this time with you to really break down Oklahoma State and understand where those opportunities and matchups fall. Offensively, this is a team where we are going up against a veteran offensive line. and a dynamic runner in Ollie Gordon, a quarterback in Alan Bowman that has literally seen it all across the college football landscape, and a coach that has, he's coaching for all the Big 12, and a coach that he does more with less, right? He really does. And so those are some scary propositions. I feel good about Texas overall. Sometimes I'm still getting used to feeling good and being rewarded for feeling good at 11-1. I'm not there yet, like
Mm-hmm.
with other teams where you're confident and you're like, look, I trust my team. I know if we go out and execute, they'll win the game. I feel that, but at the same token, it's just a respect for Gundy. Honestly, it's a respect for Gundy. It's a respect for Oklahoma State being in this game and how they got in this game, and the turnaround that they had as a team. I appreciate you coming on today, man. And it was really, really helpful and insightful stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been a blast. And again, like I said, just kind of my fleeting thoughts. 12 years is a long time, and that's the last time Mike Gundy's won one of these. And he's had some really, really talented teams with Mason Rudolph and James Washington and Spencer Sanders and all those teams that were really good. And we as Texas fans were like, man, I hate playing those guys. They never won one, right? Just like Texas. So both of these teams, to my point earlier, they really want this one. They really need this one. So I'm expecting an all-out war. I really am. And like I said, if the score doesn't reflect it, it doesn't mean that both teams don't want it absolutely as bad as possible. So should be a great slate of college football. And obviously, if you're a Texas fan, you're a big Louisville Cardinal fan as well this week.
Hey, let me ask you this: if Texas wins, we'll go to a different side. If Texas wins, do they make the playoffs? How do you see that playing out, or do you think things will go chalk this weekend and we come up short?
Well, I'm just going to answer your question. If Texas wins, do they go to the playoff? If they win and Louisville wins, yes. I think there's no argument about it. I think head-to-head matters, and I think, you get to 4 conference champs, and obviously, that'd be a whole nother video. But I do think if Florida State loses and Texas wins, I don't see how you keep Texas out. Now, the only interesting thing is if Alabama beats Georgia, is Georgia that 4, or are they going to fall 4 spots? I don't care that they won 28 straight. You play the games that you play, right? That's my thing. That's kind of my soapbox. But it's gonna be some discussion in Grapevine, Texas, right down the road from us. But I wouldn't want to be in that room. But again, in short, yes, Texas wins, Louisville wins, they're in. That's it. Yeah. So again, and this is just another question that I have, and again, we don't know the rankings, but question that I want to ask you: will it matter if Texas wins this game, say 48-6 or 54-10, or just a lopsided margin of victory? Will that have any way on the committee ranking Texas for the next week, as opposed to if they win 13-10 or 24-20?
Unfortunately, we're late to the game in terms of the style point aspect with Texas because we've been playing close ones, really since OU, until the Tech game where we really kind of blew up. We'll see if we're rewarded for that, or where Ohio State falls. But in terms of the conference title game and trying to play the game of if Bama beats Georgia and there's now it's a whole bunch of 12-1 teams. Yeah, you need to turn up on Oklahoma State. And I think that's going to be interesting, depending on how the rankings come out, how that could supercharge Texas in another sense of knowing winning isn't just enough at this point, right? Like it's also we gotta send a message. It has nothing to do with Oklahoma State at this point. It's like, hey, we need to score all the amount of points we can because that's what Oregon's been doing, albeit against lesser competition. I think, Austin, to answer your question, it's a significant factor depending on how these rankings look.
And kind of my last fleeting point, and I think Nino had a good tweet earlier. It said, for everyone saying Texas Longhorn wins are unimpressive, where's the same energy for Georgia, Bama, and Washington? I mean, Washington 15-7 Arizona State, 24-21 Washington State. Georgia escapes Auburn. They handle business against Georgia Tech, but it's close. They escaped South Carolina at home, right? I think the national narrative is the Big 12 is weak, and I'm really sick of it because I think there's so many talented teams that, as we saw this year, everybody beat everybody. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, where you look at just top heavy conferences like, the Pac, where Washington and Oregon, and a significant drop off, right? I mean, let's not forget week 1, there were people saying, could this Colorado team beat the 2019 LSU national champion team? It's like, why was that the narrative, right?
And
And
Oregon's getting a lot of in Oregon, I think in the committee's heads, because of they were the first ones to beat Colorado at that time. It's like they got a lot of they've gotten all this credit for it. Same thing with USC, right? But these are teams that fell off the cliff, like almost all. I mean, and some of them when they played Arizona, Arizona wasn't even Arizona yet. Like that's a team that's gone the opposite direction of they were kind of messing around and now they're supercharged. But so I think that's a great point of also where these teams fall in conference play of when you played them. And those type of things. I think it's frustrating. I mean, here's the thing, Washington and Georgia are different from Bama and Texas because they're undefeated. When you are undefeated, you just need to keep winning. So for Washington and Georgia, style points only would matter where they're seated in the top 4, but being undefeated assures them a spot in the top 4, if that makes sense. Yep. For Bama and Texas, style point thing matters because they're boosting up Oregon on style points. So that's why it's relevant for us because we all have one loss. If we were undefeated, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If they score on one of those 4 red zone attempts in Dallas against OU, and Texas is, and let's say all the other games played out the same way. Let's say Malik Murphy played 2 games. We lose Jonathan Brooks still, but only Texas holds on to the 30-27 lead they had.
They're number 1.
I don't think you're getting graded the same way. It's a different conversation now.
I not only that, let's call a spade a spade. If Texas gets a stop within the last 50 seconds against Oklahoma, I'll just go out there and say it. They might be number 1. They really might be because they were flirting with it early. For sure, 2, absolutely 2, but they might be number 1. An undefeated Texas gets you a lot of clicks and a lot of interaction, and I'm not gonna go out of the realm and say that's far fetched. Oh, you're full of it. A 12-0, 13-0 Texas, I don't know how it's not number 1. Would Oklahoma be number 1 if they were undefeated? Good chance. Good chance. I know Georgia's won 28 straight, but we're talking about this year. I don't know. It's a valid point, I think.
I mean, just as proof of that, right? Michigan just beat Ohio State. Depending on where Ohio State ends up, that'll tell us how they were treated. But what about Michigan? If I'm Michigan, I just beat the number 2 team in the country.
You should be Georgia
just struggled. You should be number 1, right? But see, this is where we'll know they're full of it if they only look at one side slipping, but they don't move the top and don't change it. That's how you know they're factoring in Georgia's win streak. Because
even though they tell us they're not, though. They tell us they're not.
I just beat the number 2 team and I was number 3. How am I not number 1? And number 1 has been who's number 1 played? Nobody.
Number 1 recently. Number 1 just struggled with Haynes King.
Right. So you don't move that side, but you want to move the other side. We'll see.
We'll see.
We will see. Next week, we will know the answers for sure. We're recording right before playoff stuff drops, so I'm curious to see where Ohio State, where the committee puts them. I might have a little tidbit for you guys after the playoffs drop. But, guys, make sure you like, share, subscribe. Shout out to Austin for coming on here, just helping us so we are in the know for Oklahoma State and somebody that watches this team, and has seen – the inner workings and how they got here. So thank you, Austin, for telling that story. Really, really appreciate it. And I'll see you back on for some Texas basketball content. I know you're excited to get back to what we do on the covering the Big 12. So appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Horns always up. Welcome.